reason we stay away from media stuff is because, you know, we're not going to send voice XML through the servers and things like that, you know. So, but it's just signaling. It's a pretty lightweight process to do the signaling. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like to extend what you're saying. I mean, part of the problem with SIP is it started out being reasonably lightweight, and then the telephony guys decided to shoehorn in all their features.
Well, SIP, my understanding of SIP, not that I'm, you know, I work with a lot of SIP guys, so I'm not really going to harsh on it, but my understanding is that the first version was basically a grad student project to get a phone to ring, you know, and that was kind of cool. But then people actually started to try to use it, and so all the, you know, the telephony guys came in and sort of added all this stuff to make it work, make it all go, right?
Well, all this stuff to add their own.
Sure.
The reason why telephony, part of the reason is that you know, the problem domain is very large, and you have to decide you have to attack all of that.
Yeah.
Make it complicated.
I mean, one of the things we also hope to do, you know, is, to me, telephony is kind of limited. I mean, everyone wants to do voice, but there's a lot of other interesting things that we could do if we've got these channels, right? We could do, like the guy was talking yesterday, we could do, or this morning, you know, we could do distributed musical performance, or we could do, you know, interesting whiteboarding stuff, or app sharing, or app casting, all those kinds of things. Those are sort of specialized, more specialized things in voice. You know, everyone wants to do voice, and not everyone wants to do, you know, jam sessions of the internet and those kinds of things. But to me, I mean, you know, we should be moving beyond PSTN. We should be doing more innovative applications that are a lot more interesting than just doing voice. Voice to me is pretty boring, but I'm more of a text guy anyway. So I'd rather have 10, you know, chat windows open than be on the phone. So that's sort of where I come from. But I think you know, we've got the internet. We should be able to do a lot more interesting stuff than just what's done in PSTN.
I've been talking about this at dinner last night, and this whole kind of, everybody needs some mutual things changed, I think, to succeed. I think the internet in general, the behavior that we use it in needs to be modified. We were having a discussion about how now, with the widespread use of the SRV records, because you want to have more than one machine, and you want to have something responsible the way, you know, it was an oversight not to design those right away. They made MX for mail and everything else, who cares? And they're, oh wait, we need that for everything. And I think if everyone worked together to try and make the widespread usage of that increased, as well as the structure of the internet and how the domains and the DNS works in general could be done in a way that that alone would solve half the problem in finding each other with those kinds of presences and things like that. And it's very important. Yeah, it's always the noble act that you have to. It's just that finding stuff would become so much easier then.
To some extent, DNS is irrelevant already. You don't actually use DNS, you use whatever Google gives you.
Yeah.
Google could give IP addresses for all I care.
Sure. That's true. And sometimes they do, right? You type something in Google, and I heard, when I was at a conference, I think it must have been OSCON last week, someone was, I don't think I was supposed to repeat what he said, but he said that at one of the a large search engine other than Google, like 40% of the searches are for Google. You know? So you go to, you know, Alta Vista or whatever these things are, right? And you type Google to get to Google because you don't know where Google is, right? I mean, come on, it's crazy. So yeah, that's DNS, right? That's the new DNS. Yeah.
Well, not for initiating a call with somebody, though.
Yeah, Tony says not if you're initiating a call with someone, right? I mean,
Google, it looks at the XMPP images, that is like a search for me, and then Google returns you.
Right, exactly. See, that's not only the DNS, but it's the yellow pages. I mean, it's the
it's the
good old
metadata
right.
to connections.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Well, we don't really have that right now to be able to find, you know, be able to really find people. And part of the reason that we can is that, you know, XML, I mean, email is a spam-infested ghetto, right? And so you don't really want to hand out your email address, right? But if, like in Jabber, we've got like a handshake, right? So the people can only talk to you if you've done this handshake and said, yeah, I want to talk to this person.
So I believe that one of the most interesting applications of this would be what we have right now is literally, you know, point-to-point communications. I want to talk to my friend, you know, I know his email address or his phone number or his IP address or whatnot. But that's all, you know, 20th century. 21st century is I want to find that friend. I want to find, the person who knows, I don't know, about OpenMP. What do I do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of building the community kind of thing. That's the DNS of, tomorrow.
And that was the purpose of the internet to begin with.
Right.
We were trying to distribute documentation on research.
Right.
The whole point.
To some extent, I don't care whether the person's name is Mark or Fred, right? It's the person who knows about OpenMP.
It's the content.
It's the content, right?
And after that, then it's just the names that you can.
So anyway, again, I'm an XML guy, so I would appreciate it if people would sort of check out our Jiggle stuff and send me flames. And, we love flame wars. We haven't had a good one in a while in our community, so
Oh, we're practicing them, no worries.
I think you need a good flame war once in a while to stir things up. Drive people away and bring in new people.
Well, it gets rid of all the dead wood.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a forest fire, right? So.
Is there any possibility that Jabber can replace email because of the spam problem?
Could Jabber replace email because of the spam problem? Well, yeah, it could. I mean, I tried it for a while. I tried to stop using email, but it was hard, because so many people still use it. Now, Jeremy, who started the Jabber project, he actually has an email to Jabber transport, and so every email he gets just pops up in his Jabber client, so he doesn't, but, when he logs in, he gets a lot of email. Blogs to me are sort of, in our community, we have a lot of thread by blog. We'll have one guy post a message and people will reply, and we've got Planet Jabber and so on and so forth. And to me, if you want, that sort of almost replaces a mailing list. And we could do email over Jabber for server-to-server communications. So we wouldn't need DKIM and all this kind of stuff. You could just do validated server-to-server, and then pipe email traffic over your Jabber servers. And that way we would have all of the reverse DNS stuff that we already have in Jabber, so we wouldn't have domain spoofing, which is a big problem. One of the big problems in the email world. I think user spoofing is a lot less problematic than domain spoofing, because if someone is a rogue client on my server, I can shut them down pretty easily. But if you can just spoof any domain, you got a lot of trouble. So yeah, we could do that. Whether it would take off or not, I have no idea. It seems like it might be easier to do than all the DKIM stuff and so on that they're trying to do with the IETF. And then we'd have internationalized addresses too, which will never get put into email. It's going to take 20 years. And we need a new email system. We might as well just use Jabber. So. But I'm a Jabber bigot, so I tend to think that Jabber can solve all problems. But I've tried to lessen that over time because they're perfectly good protocols. We're not trying to replace HTTP. We're not trying to replace FTP or faxes or anything like that. So we're not going to do faxes over Jabber. I can tell you that right now.
Tony had a name for what I think you were proposing organisation, and how was it? It was Snap. Shit, not another protocol. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
I was out for a second, so I don't know if I missed this, but the one biggest thing that I know Tony found when he started developing is there's no concept of passing an extension along for some sort of machine-to-machine trunking of the voice signaling. It's a big, when you get into telephony, it becomes a big issue. So unless, the question is, do you just pass it in the message as an extension and the Jabber address is a gateway, or do you do the thing with Jabber where you grab a whole domain and then the user part becomes the extension and abstract that part of it? And what makes the most sense there and coming up with a solution there? That almost mimics the SIP a little bit to do the endpoint logs in. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jabber has a way where you log in as an entire domain?
You mean as if you were a phone or some other device, or?
No, like the server-to-server stuff. You can talk to them as an entire domain. Is there a way to make a client act as an entire domain, get every message for that domain, and we can use the user part as the extension, or is it better within the Jingle spec to be specifying some extension that passes through?
So there's Jabber addresses have three aspects. One is the domain, right, which is usually a Jabber server, but it could be some component. hanging off a server, so it could be, pbx.jabber.org is some pbx that gets run there, right? So you can run, we have these sort of, usually the servers have a kind of modular architecture based on DNS names or domain names. We do routing based internally in the server to different components that are part of the service. And then there's a user part, so there's like, a user at host, and that could be, some sort of extension at pbx.jabber.org or something like that. Then we have a tertiary part of the address, which is a resource for a user. So users can have, unlike MSN or something like that, you can be logged in with 20 different resources or devices at the same time. Those sort of hang off your user at host. So you have a user at host / resource, and then you could have an extension hanging off your username. I'm not quite sure what the best way is to do it, because I'm not quite sure how people are going to sort of deploy this stuff. Are they going to deploy, are they going to deploy components, sort of a componentized thing where there's, a Jabber service would be running a PBX, or is your sort of, would your PBX be also at the same time, a Jabber router and route around stuff? So I'm not quite sure, but I'd like to talk with you guys about that, because we do need to figure that out, and what the best way is to do that. Yes, sir.
No way putting it, our service has got 150,000 users, and we're going to let them opt in to equate their phone number with sendbox.com to Jabber. So this, I think what he's really asking is, I'm not going to have 150,000 virtual clients out there representing individual Jabber ships, Jabber network, but I'm going to be able to allow someone to say, Google Doc client, type in 703-244-088 and sunrocket.com, and so all the simple on the other end.
Yes.
Okay. So I think it's what he's getting to, is that that bridge that basically exposes these IDs to the Jabber world without their actually being compliant.
I see.
Log into it. Is that kind of another way of putting it?
Is that sort of a forking thing? I mean, so I would contact your Jabber ID, and then your server would figure out, if you're available, and, rolling me over to voicemail if you're not online, those kinds of things? Yeah, so we haven't figured out the forking thing, so I'm not sure if that's what we're talking about, though.
I don't know if it's working. I think it's
not forking, it's just knowing that there are some arbitrary number of user IDs at sunrocket.com that are contactable via Gmail.
Yes.
Without there actually being a client logged into a Jabber.
Sure. Well, we don't. So we have offline messaging. So this is, I'm not sure if this is getting to your point, but you don't have to be logged in for your identity to work, right? So your Jabber ID is always there, and whether I'm able to interact with that in any sort of meaningful way right now depends on if you've got a connected client. If you don't, what are my options? Well, I can send you an offline message for text, maybe for, I can leave you a voicemail for voice communications. If I'm trying to do, a whiteboarding session, obviously I'm not going to be able to do that because you're not around, and so I'm just going to say, well, I'm going to look in my drop-down box and right-click, and I'm going to see what I can do with you right now. And if the only thing I can do, because you're offline, is leave an offline text message, maybe send an email, because, you can sort of roll over to email, or leave a voicemail or something like that. But if you're online with some resources based on our capabilities discovery that I know that there's more that I can do, when I pick up my, when I right-click, I'll have a lot of options that I can do right now. So I don't know if that gets to your point about the extensions, though. I don't know how that maps in, because I'm not a PBX guy either. I'm just a text messaging guy.
There's two distinct models that you could approach this with. The one I have now is the easiest, since I have nothing to test it with Google Talk, is I allow my one instance of my software to have as many Google IDs as it wants, or any Jabber IDs in general. And they each log in their own separate profile. The idea is you really only need one, but if you want to have two things happen, you can have two or something. And you give it one ID. You can call it with Google Talk. Everyone in the world can call it at the same time, just as a way to get, so the system itself has its own one JID. And then when it calls, by default what will happen, since it doesn't have the power to pass the specific extension inside of the switch, it'll the JID will just have a default in the configuration. So if somebody calls me, just pass them along the extension 1000, which is limiting. So then I tested it using FreeSwitch on both sides with my lip dingling. I cheated a little bit and added to the spec an extra information element tag, which is just arbitrary name value pairs. I can send anything, because I don't want to try and guess what you want to send. So using that, I've been able to do like send the caller ID name, the caller ID number, if it's being gatewayed from the PSTN, the original number that someone dialed before it started going through IP instead, and the destination number, what they think they're trying to call. All that information then gets thrown in the switch and it can do what it wants with it, and it doesn't have to think twice about it. That's the way it works on most telephony protocols to begin with. Now that's one model. The other one would be taking advantage of domains and service login, and actually no one really uses domains right anymore. That's what I was getting at before with the design of the internet. It used to be like my company has a domain, and we have all these subdomains of each of the pieces of stuff we do, and there's one for Jabber and one for email. And we kind of cheat nowadays. But
with SRV, we don't need to do that.
Right. The SRV is what makes it much easier. But if you have, let's say you have a PBX that you want to hook up. You can have pbx.mydomain.com, and you still use your good old mydomain.com address. You can, if you send something to say, pick a phone number, an actual PSTN phone number at mydomain.com, the SRV record will look it up. It'll send it to the PBX is actually logged in as a service, so that it's responsible for all the IDs, and then it'll chop off the phone number and realize you're trying to call a phone number. You'll still need those extra elements for the caller ID and stuff, which might make my first way the easier one, which is why I picked it. There is a possibility somehow with the service login. It does seem kind of nice to be able to have pbx.mydomain.com and have it manage all of the possible JIDs controlled by that software. But I don't know the exact way it fits because I'm not like a big Jabber expert or anything. I don't even know how to log in that way. I've only heard about it. So in the meantime, I've just gone with my switch can set up as many JIDs as it wants, and they can have a relationship with like infinite number of callers. Like everybody can call it in this room can call that one ID and have their own different phone call with it. When it comes to using Google Talk, you have no way to express that. So it would kind of be like, all it's missing though is if you want to call, say, the switch. When it knows it's going to be something in that situation, then just a little more information you got to provide. Like, I want to call FreeSwitch at jabber.com like I did in my test, but I want to go to extension 1000 there too. I don't just want to go to the default. And here's my caller ID name and number. You asked me that in the preferences, so that's what it'll. Just send them as it's just one more tag with a bunch of name value pairs in it, so it's not really that intrusive to the protocol. So that's the way I solved it as a test to see if it worked, and it did work as far as being able to at least pass through. Then I can actually take a SIP call into the system, take all the important stuff in the SIP and still get it across the back-to-back Jabbers. At Linux Tag in Germany, they were demoing FreeSwitch. It was a lot younger than it was about 4 months ago, and but we already had the Jabber working, and they had a triple NAT there. It's impossible to get any phone calls in. But we had a box in there play. We used like SSH tunnels and stuff, so I could get a prompt on the machine. And I brought it up and went on Jabber with FreeSwitch on one side. Then I had one on a normal internet connection in our data center, just standard, it had a direct IP link. And then a SIP URL. So the FreeSwitch is listening on SIP and Jingle at the same time, so it'll come in to the switch, turn it into Jingle, and bypass all the NAT using all the cool tricks you can do without having to worry about how to find each other. Was able to establish RTP even across the triple NAT, and you could just call the SIP URL, call straight in their demo over in the Pingtel booth. And, we were just talking to them, how's it going? No one else can do this. So that's the part I like. Yeah. I want to be able to capture that, because the one thing that I want out of it, for sure, is the capability of A wants to talk to B, and it doesn't care where it comes from.
But that's actually sort of proxy identity, and I wanted to make a comment that as far as proxy identity.
The guys online
yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that as far as proxy identity goes, I'm fine with having one identity represented, in different ways. Let's say, in a Jabber channel. I'm fine with one single proxy identity, knowing how to get to the real identity. Against would be Jabber protocol deciding which of the proxy identities is a true one. Because that way the complexity bomb is just unbelievably huge. You don't have to. I mean, it's really about proxying it. So here is an identity and you want to talk to it. If that identity actually does something weird, I don't know, calls me on my cell phone or, you know, talks to me over the pager or whatnot, that's up to this identity to decide. It's not up to the Jabber protocol to decide that this identity is somehow better than this one. Because again, one of the cool things that I constantly keep in mind is a work that guys who originally worked on Plan 9, now their project is called Plan B, do at Madrid University. They basically have a system which understands where you are and what's the best way to contact you. But still, they have only one proxy identity. So when they send you an email, that email, depending on where you are, could turn into an instant message, phone call, you know, basically your speakers on your system, you know, just telling you stuff. And they do it by providing one proxy identity that understands how to talk to all different instances of you. They don't complicate the protocol itself, and that's very important because you have to keep protocol simple enough so that you could have an ability of implementing these proxy identities easily enough. Again, one of the reasons that MTP is still around is that Telnet is my email client. I literally connect to the 25th port and do stuff from time to time, right? So if Jabber is more complicated than that, there is no way it can replace email with all its bad stuff.
That on port 5222 in Jabber. So.
See, that's what I'm talking about. The protocol has to be simple enough for people to successfully build on this protocol.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, there's some work there to figure out the right way to do that, but we don't want to. So, Tony, when you contact someone and you're contacting the switch or you're contacting them? Like if I'm St. Peter at jabber.org, are you going to be, and you want to call me, are you going to contact my switch or are you going to contact me and then, my server's going to do the right thing and hand things off to the switch or whatever? That's what.
What would you be using at the time? Finding you just in general? Something that represents you that stays online?
Well, see, like to me, like actually my email address is the same as my Jabber ID, right? So it's pretty easy for people to remember, and that's a memorable thing rather than that I'm at some extension or something like that, right? Now, it could be that my identity, as far as you're concerned, is some phone number and an extension, but how does that get mapped to the, to the internet world? I'm not sure, but you guys are the PBX telephony guys. I'm the Jabber guy.
Well, if I was going to make a phone call to, say, somebody's house or their cell phone, they no longer have an identity when it hits the PSTN because of the legacy. As soon as you cross that bridge, you just shed all that extra bonus stuff that would be kind of cool to take all the way to their telephone. Yeah. We can't get everyone to smash their phones and burn down all the whole poles. If we could, that would be a great way. They'd have no choice but to start using cooler stuff. Really, all they have is their phone number. It boils down to their phone number at the end of the day. So that's really the one thing you got to send. Like, I want to call a cell phone, and this is what this PSTN is going to strip away all the rest of the information. Is only going to reach them if it calls this destination. So you at least somehow have to get that across, so the other side can feed that into the circuit that's going to eventually call and make your cell phone ring. That's like some of them give you the ability to say who you are, but again, only represented by a 10-digit number. So your whole life boils down to a 10-digit number once you cross that bridge into the PSTN, which is kind of sad.
But to some extent, you don't care how this identity representing the actual user. What you care is capabilities of that user. So as long as you have an ability of contacting a particular identity, and that identity has a way of expressing that it is capable of voice, text, multimedia, all sorts of stuff, you should be fine, right? I mean,
yeah, I believe I'm like really undereducated in the whole Jabber stuff, but I do recall seeing there's some sort of a service discovery thing when The Jabber ID is kind of like your doorbell.
Right, exactly.
And you can query it. Like usually the server does it for you. It doesn't have to bother the client. Even when the guy's not logged in, you can usually do it. So if he's not logged in, the list will be smaller. But when he is, it'll be like, yeah, bill@somedomain.com. He's logged in not only from 3 places, but you can find him at this telephone number. And if you can get to the PSTN, and here's a million different weird protocols and which way you can get them to.
Yeah. So Tony, to do that. So there's 2 things, right? If you're logged in, you've got a resource hanging off your address, and then you send service discovery directly to that resource or that device or whatever that thing is. You can find out the capabilities of that device. I might be logged in with my PDA, I might be logged in with my phone, I might be logged in with a laptop, so on. Those would all have different capabilities, but if I send a capabilities discovery just to your bare address, without these resources, I can either, if I have the right privileges, I can find out what your devices are. If you have no devices, if my server is providing some services, or there are other entities in that cloud for my domain that can provide those services, maybe it's a PBX, maybe it's a voicemail system, whatever it is, I would be able to discover those. So we would expose those in Jabber, but the Jabber router itself wouldn't be doing that stuff, right? But we can expose those if the Jabber service knows about that stuff. I can do discovery on your bare address, find out, hey, I can leave a voicemail, or I can get forwarded to an assistant, or whatever I can do. But that would need to be the way we do it in Jabber. That would be exposed through Jabber, but the Jabber server wouldn't necessarily be offering those services.
No, that goes back to that second way I described that I'm not completely sure how to do, but the idea is there. If you took a service login to Jabber, then when that query is made, you get a chance to do that with your entire software. So say I'm using my free switch I presented, I'm logged in, someone queries the ID, I could log in to the point where it would actually send that entire query to me and let me formulate the reply to it. So I could take all my stuff that no one ever heard of before and advertise it out. Like you can get to them with this phone number and this, you can call them, email them and stuff. And I'll be able to act as the server for those things. I'll have privileges. So I actually send all that stuff down into my software and potentially can give back to the address to the client that will lead to all these things. And my own way of doing it. Even in different protocols.
But, so in my opinion, this is sorry.
So in my opinion, this is exactly the right architecture. You want Jabber to let you find the other party, but you don't want Jabber to handshake on your behalf.
Yeah.
Once you find each other, it's up to you to handshake whatever you want to.
Yes.
That's the key. Is basically what happens is you said, your name is jabber.com. Basically, we were out.
I'm a .org guy. I'm not a .com guy.
Sorry. I apologize. So at jabber.org. So basically, you route the request to your identity, which is at jabber.org. You've defined, based on your identity on jabber.org, how you want to be reached.
Yes.
So you define whether you plugged in a zip phone or you log on the client, it itself has capabilities, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
But, I don't say I want to talk specifically to your device. I want to talk to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the wide world, the idea of the identity is not protocol specific. There's the idea of I'm trying to reach your San Andre. Doesn't say anybody. It doesn't say anything in its own right about how you're going to be contacted.
Well, that's sort of a meta identity question, right? If look, I want to contact Ron, but I don't know. Yeah, that's when I go to Google and I type in your name, right? And I find out that there's all these different ways to get in touch with you.
But then the other question I have is the whole federation thing. So if I write an application in free switch, then there's this whole event system that he's built up for me so that I can expose some new protocol we can handshake over, and we can trade data back and forth, and it's a service that I'm exposing to free switch. Let's say I have that on my personal domain, and then I also have people who know me through jabber.org, and I want to be able to expose the services that I have at my corners.com domain to jabber.org and through Cluecon. Is there a way for you federate all those services across all your Jabber?
Well, there's two things there. By federation, we mean interdomain communications. We don't mean aliasing or forwarding or something like that. So if I want to be able to contact you at jabber.org, but really I'm going to thehorners.com, that we don't do that right now. Because part of the reason we don't is that we have all this reverse DNS checking and we've got all this stuff that you can't say that you're over here, but you're really over there, like you can do with email. The part of the reason we don't have the spam is because you can't do that, which is kind of, it's very restricting, and it makes it difficult to do the kinds of creative things you can do with email aliases and stuff like that.
So you don't get the power of being, so then...
But we don't get the power of spam either.
Right, that's for sure. That, you get the nice...
The
thing,
power of
but then
spam.
you end up not being able to... Let's say, for example, you have an IRC transport on this one, on jabber.org, and on mine I have a MSN transport.
Oh, we can share all that stuff out. So the fact that I log into jabber.org, so, you know, I'm over here on jabber.org, I can use services anywhere on the network. So if there's an IRC gateway over here, and there's a, you know, there's an RSS feed over there, I mean, once you're on the network, you can use all the stuff that's all over the network. I just can't masquerade as one identity over. So you can't have your identity at jabber.org somehow map over to your thehorners.com.
Over the whole internet, your Jabber ID.
Yeah.
Choose one server, stick with it.
Yeah, well, but you can run your own server and stuff like that. I think we got to probably finish here, don't we? Are we like getting kicked out of this room soon? Yes. You could send that as part of the service discovery, right? So you could say, hey, thanks for contacting me over here, but I've moved.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I'm over here now, and those kinds of things.
That's a way to do it without breaking the whole trust authentication.
So, you know how you're saying that seems like the right architecture? No. The problem is the regular internet domain system is the legacy gateway into this whole thing, which was kind of what I was getting at with the SRV stuff, because that needs to be adapted more. There are only a few people use it, and you keep hearing about how no one supports it and stuff. You need that first to figure out which server to do all this cool stuff with. So you start with the normal, what looks like an email address, and it'll get you the exact address of the box that you can ask, and then from there, it's like the first step in the whole thing. Unfortunately, I have to work on that first, I think. From my perspective, I'm actually going to go down and write the whole DNS client to make sure it's thread safe and I can do a lot of it, so I can afford to be doing these lookups. Because as soon as I throw DNS into my application, it's probably going to block and get stuck everywhere unless I have the world's most robust and perfect DNS resolver that's aware of these NA pointers and all these SRV records. And that's what I was kind of hinting at before, and I said APR needs something. I'm going to probably write them a DNS plugin. And that will propagate usage of it, I think.
But there aren't a lot of resolvers that do it.
Yeah, so we kind of need to push for that to be used. And now we're being forcibly ejected from the conference because of our unruly behavior. We are, though, going to go hang out in the lounge right down the hall. There's a bar right over there. I actually think that... See you later, all you people online.
Conference is ended.
Oh wait, we need to thank our sponsors.
Oh, thank the sponsors, yes. I don't know who they are, though. I don't have the list off the top of my head.
Sangoma, Voxeo, OpenVox, Pinktel, Zip Foundry. Huh? I already said Sangoma. We love Sangoma, Voxeo. We really appreciate you guys. We hope to work with you very shortly on some projects.